34 minutes past the hour of 6. You are tuning to Radio Islam International. This is the Hajj broadcast, and we have an exciting lineup for the next 1.5 hours, inshallah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks in Quran of how once the call of Hajj was made, then people would flock to the blessed lands on various different or from various different routes. And we've seen, as Maulana Yusuf Rawat has mentioned, that we have people trying various different transport mediums to get to Makkah al-Mukarramah during this blessed season. So the recent one which we've come across is people doing Hajj on horseback, and that's something quite interesting. First of all, riding horse towards Hajj, thinking that the act of riding a horse as well as something which Rasulullah had completed, done in his life, and proceeding for Hajj at the same time. And then you think of the logistics around it, right? Where do these brothers sleep? How do they eat? Where do you pack your bags? What happens if you're overweight? So we have a brother who is a spokesperson of the group that has traveled from Spain to Makkah al-Mukarramah on horseback. And inshallah, he'll be giving us more insight into that.
Welcome, Brother Yusuf, to Radio Islam International. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me.
Jazakumullah khair. So I believe you are from the UK and you're the spokesperson for the group. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm based in the UK, but I'm originally from Egypt.
Oh, originally from Egypt, mashallah. So, just looking at you, I'm thinking, being the spokesperson of something that's so historical in today's times, like how we have this desire to be among the Hujjaj. What's your desire like to have been among this group of men that went on horseback all the way from Spain to Makkah al-Mukarramah?
As you've mentioned, it's firstly being in Hajj is a massive blessing. So even if I was just there for the Hajj period, it would have been an incredible feeling. But also we've followed their journey from Spain when no one knew about them, all the way till now, where alhamdulillah we've had a lot of media appearances and been invited to have many talks in different countries, and alhamdulillah it's been an incredible journey.
Okay, mashallah. So your relationship developed basically by just following them, or are you friends with these brothers?
So I've, funnily enough, last year I was in a mosque retreat in London, and Abdul Qadir, one of the three riders, he's a project manager for Hajj on horseback, and we met at that retreat. And then over a year we formed a friendship, and when he mentioned the project to me, I was like, oh, you should really sort of document this because it'll help you in your goal of reaching Mecca, and alhamdulillah it did.
Subhanallah. So you speak of Abdul Qadir, and he mentioned that he had this intention. What was the motivation? Would you know what was the actual motivation? Are the three brothers all from Spain, or is Spain just the particular starting point?
So yes, all three of them are from Spain. Some also have Moroccan roots, but they know each other from Spain as well. So it's brother Abdul Qadir, Abdullah, and Tariq. And the idea was actually Abdullah's idea. So Abdullah reverted over 30 years ago, and he felt incredible gratitude to Allah for having blessed him with hidayah. And as a result, I believe he was also studying Andalusian history at the time, and as a result, he promised to Allah that he would make Hajj the way his ancestors did. And subhanAllah, 30 years later is they've trained for a couple of years, and then now has come the time that the promise came true, alhamdulillah.
Subhanallah. Brother Yusuf, can you tell us how many days exactly did it take to accomplish this journey?
It took around 7 months.
7 months.
Yeah.
Salam.
And what's the travel like? So could you run us through the logistics? Like what route do you take first of all? Because I don't think you can just have the horses riding on the highway, through your normal routes. How do you plot your route, and what was the route like?
So you'd be surprised because some countries did allow that. So in some of the European countries, the Hajjaj were allowed to just ride on the road. In other countries, they were escorted by the police, so it helped with traffic control, especially in Turkey. In Turkey, it was the case. And then I remember there was 1 or 2 exceptions where they had to take a detour and go through a forest without really knowing the way. But alhamdulillah, they sort of just that tawakkalna on Allah and found their way through the forest. And but in most cases, it was using just traditional
Right.
roads.
And in terms of your accommodation, what was that like? Because now, even if you're stopping at a bed and breakfast or a hotel, what do you do with the horses? How did you work the logistics in terms of that?
So it again it varied from country to country. In the beginning, the Hajj just had their tents and they'd set up camp somewhere, sort of
Mm.
in the wild, and they'd have sort of a fence around the horses that they would set up. Um, and then over time, it evolved to they were hosted by equestrian centers in France and Italy, um, and a couple in Turkey and Syria as well, I think. And aside from that, there was a Saudi social media figure that also accompanied them halfway through the trip, or when they became viral, and he's managed to secure a caravan for them. So in a lot of occasions, they've managed to camp in the caravan, and again, set up a barrier for the horses to not go away during that time.
Okay, and what was the final destination point which they reached? Did they ride right into Mecca, or where was the point where they?
So it was just at the border between Jordan and Saudi. So as soon as that border was crossed, it was the end of the trip, and the horses were then taken to Riyadh to be taken care of while the Hujjaj performed Hajj.
Interesting indeed, subhanallah. Any particular challenges or highlights from the trip that you want to share with our listeners here on Radio Islam International?
I think the biggest challenge has been just getting through the borders. So obviously, in the time of our ancestors, the borders weren't a physical thing as they are now, and also it was much easier to go between country to country. And one thing we learned as well is that the horses are not considered a medium of transport anymore. So instead of, for example, riding a car from one country to another and only needing a passport yourself, the horses needed a lot of paperwork, and that sometimes delayed us at some of the country borders. There was a situation in as we were crossing into Slovenia, I think, or Serbia, actually, Serbia, where the government changed as we were crossing, and that caused us over a week's worth of delay. But alhamdulillah, we kept making dua and working on the paperwork and found a way through.
Obviously, you mentioned the challenge of the horses passing through the borders, and my curiosity really intrigues me. 7 months on horseback would require a lot of physical endurance as a human being, right? So you would obviously train for that. But were these horses also trained? Because obviously the horses in the past, in history, were common day transport, right? Today's horses are quite more relaxed and chilled out,
It was lazy
but
over the
lazy.
generations.
That's one. So did the horses, undergo any injury? Was there any sickness that prevailed over them? Were there any particular challenges regarding those horses? And were they the same horses that they departed from Spain that they reached with in Mecca? Or did they swap horses in between?
So the original plan was there was one horse being ridden and one horse resting, so two horses per rider, or maybe five in total, and they would switch. But and the horses are Arabian horses, so they're endurance horses to begin with. But they've also been trained. So 2 years beforehand, there were several rounds of training into Portugal, into the south of Spain, etc., both in the summer and the winter. So the riders were trained mentally and physically, and the horses were also trained. Now, it didn't mean that it went fully smoothly because there were some points of the trip where food was lacking, for example, or at least diversity in the diet of the horses was lacking. So one of the horses was a bit unwell, and we had to get a vet in. The vets came in at several points for checks, but for this specific horse, I think there was a muscular injury at some point as well. So the horse was we've left it to be taken care of, and then it joined us later in the trip. But overall, alhamdulillah, it was pretty smooth. Now the only other thing was that when we reached Bosnia, or when the riders reached Bosnia, because there was that issue with the paperwork beforehand, the horses had to be driven through one country, and we were given replacement horses during that time, and then
Oh.
given back to us when we reached Turkey, and then from Turkey to Saudi, the horses remained, alhamdulillah.
Subhanallah. I would assume the ride back wouldn't be with horse. I'm
Yeah, no.
assuming the brothers. 7 months has been a long time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them with a Hajj Maqbool Mabrur. Jazakumullah khairan, Yusuf, for your time this evening here in South Africa. And may Allah accept your sacrifice and your involvement in this entire project. And may Allah make it be a footing stone for your acceptance for Hajj, inshallah, and your family.
Ameen. Barakallahu feekum. Thank you.
If you were to travel to for Hajj,